Hello and welcome to the lecture. Here we are going to start with polity, and that is going to be the part 2. Before starting of the lecture, as usual, we have small disclaimer to be discussed first. The disclaimer goes like the images used in a slide deck are for educational purposes only. We respect the intellectual property rights of the original creators and owners of these images. If you are the owner of any of the images used in this deck and have any concerns or issues, please contact us at sathi@iitk.ac.in and we shall remove the images. Indian Constitution is what we are going to cover here. The Constitution of India is the supreme law of India. This document lays down the framework which demarcates fundamental political code, structure, procedures, powers, and duties of government institutions. India is a democracy, and democracy is mainly of two types: direct democracy or indirect democracy. In direct democracy, the people having a general participation in lawmaking process, even in the implementation of the law. Whereas in direct democracy, the people not having a direct participation in lawmaking process and governance of the country. Instead of direct participation, they choose the representatives who will be the part of legislature. They will formulate a laws to govern the people who elected them towards that particular legislature. In India, we have indirect democracy. Like, we normally do not participate in lawmaking process. We elect the representatives for the central legislature as well as the state legislature. These representatives become responsible for us for a given time period of 5 years. After every 5 years, again the election will be there. And if we elect them again to be the representative of us, then for next 5 years, again they will be the responsible person for our governance. Indirect democracy is further dependent on constitution. Constitution is the main power hub that defines the roles, responsibilities, duties, structure, procedures, and rest the things we require to run a nation. Here, the Constitution of India is the supreme law of India. All the things, political code, structure, procedures, powers, and duties of government and government institutions, they all are empowered by the Constitution of India. The Indian Constitution is unique in both spirit and content. Spirit here signifies the intention of constitutional makers. Content signifies the provisions provided in the Constitution to cope with the intention of original constitutional makers. The Indian Constitution replaced the Government of India Act 1935 as the country's fundamental governing document, and the dominion of India became the Republic of India. When the Britishers ruling the country, they had passed several laws in order to govern the country. The last law that they had passed was Indian Independence Act of 1947, which finally provided independence to India. Before it, when they had the rule in the country, they passed the Government of India Act 1935. On that time, this particular act was the main source to define all the things we had covered, like political code, structure, procedures, powers, duties of government institution and government. When we implemented the Indian Constitution on 26 January 1950, Then, Government of India Act 1935 repealed, and the new source for all these things came into the power, that was the Constitution of India. The Constitution of India contains 395 articles, and these articles scheduled in 22 parts. Additional articles and parts are inserted later through various amendments. Originally, when we implemented the Constitution, we had 395 articles and only 22 parts. Over the period of time, because the situation of society, of economy, or a nation as a whole is not static or fixed, it is developing or dynamic. As per our need, we added the different articles into the different part of the Constitution through the provisions of amendment. Amendment signifies making the change in the Constitution, and that is powered by which article? Article 368 of Constitution itself. Remember, Article 368 of Indian Constitution empowers the Parliament of India to make the amendments in the Constitution as per the need of the nation. There are also 12 schedules in the Indian Constitution. Adoption date of the Constitution of India is November 26, 1949. Some important dates that we need to cover up. Remember, on 24th November 1949, then 26th November 1949, then 24th January 1950, then 26th January 1950. On 24th November 1959, draft of Constitution became ready. On 26th November 1949, the Constitution in its original drafted form was adopted by the Constituent Assembly. On 24th January 1950, Constituent Assembly, all the members signed the Constitution of India. And finally, on 26th January 1950, we implemented the Indian Constitution. Ever doubt if we had already adopted the Constitution on 26 November 1949? Still, we choose to implement it on 26 January 1950. What was the reason? The reason is simple. It was Suffrage Day. On 26 January 1930, the Indian National Congress had the session in Lahore, where we adopted 26 January 1930 as the Suffrage Day. That means full sovereignty of Indians over the Indian country. That's why we waited till 26 January 1950 finally implement the Constitution. Indian Independence Act of 1947. Making of the Constitution. In 1934, the idea of Constituent Assembly for India was put forward for the first time by M.N. Roy. M.N. Roy was the first person who demanded the Constituent Assembly to prepare the Constitution. In 1935, the Indian National Congress, which was one of the important political organization in the country on that time, it was for the first time when the INC officially demanded a Constituent Assembly to frame the Constitution of India. In 1938, Jawaharlal Nehru, on behalf of Indian National Congress, declared that the Constitution of Free India must be framed without outside interference, and that should be framed by the Constituent Assembly. which will be elected on the basis of adult franchise. In 1940, British offered, which is known as August offer. The demand was finally accepted by the British government to form the Constituent Assembly. On that time, the Second World War was going on. From 1939 to 1945, the Second World War was going on. During that time, in 1940, to ensure the Indian participation in the war, the British government presented the August offer, in which they accepted the demand of forming Constituent Assembly. But after the war, in 1942, when the Indian representatives like Indian National Congress and Muslim Leagues, Hindu Mahasabha and all, they rejected the August offer. Finally, in 1942, the Britishers sent Cripps mission under the leadership of Sir Stafford Cripps. He was a member of the British cabinet. He came to India with a draft proposal of the British government on the framing of an independent constitution to be adopted after World War II. In 1946, finally, the British government sent the cabinet mission to the country, in which they constituted the Constituent Assembly in November 1946 under the scheme of cabinet mission. What was the composition of the Constituent Assembly and the features of this? Let's see. The total strength of the Constituent Assembly was to be 389. Total members. Out of these, 296 seats were to be allotted to British India and 93 seats to the princely state. When the Britishers ruling the country, mainly the country of India was divided into two broad parts. First, British India, the territories that were directly governing by the Britishers. Second division was of princely states. These were those princely states which were adopted the or accepted the British paramountcy over them, but they were allowed to manage their internal matters. So that was the division of India on that time. When Constituent Assembly was formed, this 389 number got divided into these twos with some fixed seat numbers. 296 seats given to the British India, while 93 seats given to the princely state. Out of the 296 seats which were allotted to British India, 292 members were to be drawn from 11 governors' provinces, and these provinces were Madras, Bombay, UP. On that time, UP was known as Sanyukt Prant or United Province, not Uttar Pradesh. Then central provinces, Bihar, Odisha, Punjab, Northwest Frontier Province, Sindh, Bengal, and Assam. And four from the four chief commissioner provinces, one from each, like from Delhi, from Ajmer Mewar, from Kurk, and from British Baluchistan. Each province and princely state or group of states, in case of small states, were to be allotted seats in proportion to their respective population. If we take example, the population is 100, the seat number will be 1. So there are 4 states, A, B, C, D, or not state, but you can say it's a mixture of state and the princely states. A having the population 400, B 300, C 100, D 200. One seat is on 100, which means A will get 4 seats, B will get 3 seats, C will get 1 seat, D will get 2 seats. That is the allocation of seat as per the proportion of the population. Seats allocated to each British province were to be divided among the three principal communities: Muslim, Sikh, and General. The general category representing all those which are not Muslim and Sikh as per the proportion to their population. The Constituent Assembly was to be a partly elected and partly nominated body. Those seats which were given to the British India, their provision of direct election was applicable. Those seats which were given to princely states, there the princely states got a provision to nominate their representative towards the Constituent Assembly, which makes it partly elected and partly nominated. Although the Constituent Assembly was not directly elected by the people of India on the basis of adult franchise. The voting was to be done by the method of proportional representation by means of single transferable vote. Means, if we even consider the British India, so the representatives will be elected by the provincial legislature by the members of this legislature. It means people will not directly elect the member to be part of the Constituent Assembly, but the province legislature members or legislative members will elect the person amongst them who is going to be the part of Constituent Assembly. The representatives of princely states were to be nominated by the heads of the princely state. Thus, the Constituent Assembly was a partly elected and partly nominated body. The representatives of the princely state were to be nominated by the heads of the princely state, as I have told you. Indian Independence Act of 1947 declares Constituent Assembly was made a fully sovereign body. Means the British government or the British will have no control over the Constituent Assembly. Assembly also became a legislative body. The Assembly became the first parliament of free India, like Dominion legislature. Whenever the Assembly met as the constituent body, it was chaired by Dr. Rajendra Prasad, and when it met as the legislative body, it was chaired by G.V. Malvankar. These two functions continued till November 26, 1949. Broadly, the Assembly had two functions. First, to drafted the provision for the Constitution, so to be acted as constituent body. Second, make the laws and rules to govern the country in general, so to be acted as the legislative body. So when legislative body, G.V. Malvankar, when constituent body, Dr. Rajendra Prasad. Election to Constituent Assembly. The election to the Constituent Assembly was held in July-August 1946 for 290 seats that were allotted to British Indian provinces. In this election, the Indian National Congress won 208 seats, whereas Muslim League won 73 seats. It is important to note that the Constituent Assembly included almost all important personalities of India at that time, except Mahatma Gandhi and Muhammad Ali Jinnah. These two key figures were not the part of the Constituent Assembly. Mahatma Gandhi, who having the political roots in INC, Indian National Congress, Muhammad Ali Jinnah, who having the political roots at ML, Muslim League. What was the working of the Constituent Assembly? On 9 December 1946, First meeting of the Constituent Assembly was held. On 13 December 1946, Jawaharlal Nehru moved the historic Objectives Resolution in the Assembly. And the Objectives Resolution signifies the main purpose of Constituent Assembly. And later on, these objectives and resolutions were even added to the preamble of the Indian Constitution. On 22nd January 1947, the resolution was unanimously adopted by the Assembly, which means there was no conflict occurred while voting and discussing the objectives and resolution. What were the objectives and resolution? So Jawaharlal Nehru moved this historic resolution on the date of 13 December 1946 in the Assembly. It contained the fundamentals and philosophy of constitutional structure. Like if we talk about the preamble of the constitution, that signifies India is sovereign, secular, socialist, democratic, and republic. Right? So these were actually showing how our constitution got drafted to make India a sovereign country, which means on India, the paramountcy of British will be end. Secular, which means the Indian government will not, you can say, support only one religion. Socialist, Indian government having a responsibility to take care of the people of country. Democratic, the India will adopt the democracy. Republic, the head of the Indian government, even the head of the nation, they both will be elected and not nominated or not be the part as per the monarch system. This resolution was adopted on 22nd January 1947 by the Assembly. Our preamble is the modified version of objective and resolution. What are the salient features of the Constitution? The salient features of the Constitution or the Indian Constitution is unique in its contents and spirit, like spirit, intention, content, the provision. The salient features of the Constitution as it stands today are as follows. First, the Indian Constitution is the lengthiest written constitution. What do you mean by the written constitution? The constitution is generally of two types: written, unwritten. The Indian Constitution is having the major influence from US and British. So US Constitution is written constitution. British Constitution is unwritten constitution. When the constitution is written, there is the limited number of power granted to the government because everything is well defined already in the constitution. When the constitution is unwritten, so there is no limit. It means unlimited powers granted to the government. The government could even modify the laws and all because there is no written provision to deal with such kind of scenario. In USA, there is a written constitution. In British, there is an unwritten. So in US, the supremacy is of constitution. Whereas in British, being the part of unwritten constitution, the supremacy is given to the parliament. In India, we have the supremacy of constitution. So Indian constitution is the lengthiest written constitution. Constitution are classified into written like the American Constitution or unwritten like the British Constitution. The same I have told you. The Constitution of India is the lengthiest of all the written constitution of the world. Four factors that have contributed to the elephantine size of our constitution. These factors are geographical factor. India, by geography, is the vast country. So that's why we required a proper detailing of laws and provisions to include the each and every geographical territory to be the governing part of the constitution. Historical factors. Previously, prior to Britishers, you can say, India was divided amongst the kingdom. Even during the British time, the India was divided into British India and princely states. British India having the separate laws, while the princely states having the separate laws. In order to combining them, we have to detailing the provisions we were going to make in the constitution. That was the reason for historical factors. Single constitution for both the center and the state. Unlike the USA, where there are two constitutions, the federal constitution that governing the nation and then the state constitution, each state having their own constitution. Unlike this model, in India, we have the single constitution that deals with both the central government and the state government. Dominance of legal luminaries in the Constituent Assembly. Most of the members of the Constituent Assembly having the legal background. So they were explaining in detail each and every provision to ensure the legality of the provisions. That also contributed to make the constitution in the elephantine size. Now, committees of the Constituent Assembly. To cope with the wide range of specialized tasks, the Constituent Assembly set up major committees to outline the proposed constitution. Each committee having their designated or different roles. Let's see them. Major committees. Union Powers Committee. The head was Jawaharlal Nehru. Union Constitution Committee. Again, the head was Jawaharlal Nehru. State Committee. Again, the head was Jawaharlal Nehru. Rules of Procedure Committee. The head was Rajendra Prasad. Steering Committee. The head was Rajendra Prasad. Provincial Constitution Committee. The head was Sardar Patel. Drafting Committee. The head was Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. Advisory Committees on Fundamental Rights, Minorities, and Tribal and Excluded Areas. The head was Sardar Patel. The Drafting Committee was the most important. It was set up on date of 29 August 1947. Consisted of 7 members. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, who was also the chairman of the committee, and Gopal Swami Iyengar, Alladi Krishna Swami Iyer, Dr. K.M. Munshi, Sayyid Muhammad Sadaullah, and Madhava Rao. He replaced B.L. Mitra. T.T. Krishna Ramachari, who replaced D.P. Kaitan. Some important facts about Constituent Assembly. Elephant was adopted as a symbol for Constituent Assembly. Sir B.N. Rao, who was appointed as the Constitutional Advisor to the Constituent Assembly. HVR Iyengar was the secretary to Constituent Assembly. S.N. Mukherjee was the chief draftsman of Constitution in Constituent Assembly. Prem Bihari Raizada, he was the calligrapher of the Constitution. The Hindi version calligraphy was done by Vasant Krishnan Vaidya and illuminated by Nandalal Bose. Nandalal Bose and B.R. Sinha decorated and beautified the Constitution later. What were the constituents of the objectives and resolutions? First, to make India as an independent, sovereign, and republic. Second, it declared the aim of the Constituent Assembly to write a constitution which foster the unity of the nation and ensure its economic and political security. All powers and authorities of sovereign and independent India and its constitution shall flow from the people. So remember, the Constitution of India derives its power from people of India. In reverse, we could say the people of India are the main source to give the power to the Constitution of India. India is having a federal form of government with division of powers between the center and the states. Originally, the Indian government structure was divided into the two parts. Central government to govern the nation and external factors, or you can say international relations. Then state governments. To look after respective states. However, additionally, after 93rd and 94th Act of 1993, we added the third form of government called local government to look after the local level by introducing the Panchayat Raj system or Panchayati Raj and reviving the previously existed municipality system. As per the constitution in the original form, remember again I am saying central government and state government. Only two forms of government were there. Additionally, through the 93rd and 94th Act of 1993, Amendment Act of 1993, we added the third form, that is local government, by introducing the Panchayati Raj and municipality. The division of powers between the center and the state defined by the constitution by virtue of union list, state list, and concurrent list. The union list deals with the subjects on which only the central government could make the law. Central government here signifies the Parliament of India. State lists where the state legislature having the right to make the laws. Concurrent list where the both the central and state government could make the laws. All people of India shall be guaranteed and secured the social, economic, and political justice, equality of status and opportunities, and equality before the law, and fundamental freedoms of speech, expression, belief, faith, worship, vocation, association, and action. These are subject to law and public morality. The minorities, backward and tribal areas, depressed and other backward classes shall be provided adequate safeguards. which is often defined as constitutional reservations. To maintain the integrity of the territory of the Republic and the sovereign rights on land, sea, and air according to the law of civilized nations. To attain a rightful and honored place in the world and make a willing contribution to the promotion of world peace and the welfare of mankind. Other functions performed. On May 1949, the Assembly ratified the India's membership of the Commonwealth. Commonwealth is a group of nations which were one colonized by the British or the United Kingdom. On 22nd July 1947, Assembly adopted the national flag of India. On January 24, 1950, Assembly adopted the national anthem of India. On January 24, 1950, the Assembly adopted the national song. On January 24, 1950, the Assembly elected Dr. Rajendra Prasad as the first President of India. On January 1950, 24th January 1950, the Assembly held its final session. The Constitution, as adopted on November 26, 1949, contained a preamble, 22 parts, 395 articles, and 8 schedules. Originally, that was the composition of the Constitution: 22 parts, 395 articles, and 8 schedules, along with the preamble. Preamble is a summarized part of all these 22 parts, 395 articles, and 8 schedule. It is a summarized part. The preamble was enacted after the entire constitution was already enacted to summarize the spirit and content of the constitution. Some provision of the constitution pertaining to citizenship, elections, provisional parliament, temporary and transitional provisions, and short title contained in Articles 5, Article 6, Article 7, Article 8, Article 9, Article 60, Article 324, Article 366, Article 367, Article 379, Article 380, Article 388, Article 391, Article 392, and Article 393 came into force on November 26, 1949 itself. When we adopted the constitution, these articles were enforced already. In all, the Constituent Assembly had 11 sessions over the tenure of 2 years, 11 months, and 18 days. The total expenditure incurred on making the constitution was amounted to rupees 64 lakhs. Other functions performed by the Assembly. The oldest member, Dr. Sachinand Sinha, was elected as the interim president of Constituent Assembly. Later on December 11, 1946, Dr. Rajendra Prasad was elected as the president and H.C. Mukherjee as the vice president of the Constituent Assembly. The Constitution contains not only the fundamental principles of governance but also detailed administrative provisions. Silent features of the Indian Constitution. The Indian Constitution is drawn from various sources, or we could say from various other constitutions of the world existed on that time. The Constitution borrowed from almost every constitution of the world that were existed. Go after the sources of the Constitution. So here we have sources, here we have features borrowed. Government of India Act 1935. Features borrowed, federal scheme, Office of Governor, Judiciary, Public Service Commission, emergency provisions, and administrative details. From British Constitution, we borrowed parliamentary government, rule of law, legislative procedures, single citizenship, cabinet system, prerogative rights, parliamentary privileges, and bicameralism. From US Constitution, we borrowed fundamental rights, independence of judiciary, judicial review, impeachment of the president, removal of Supreme Court and High Court judges, and the post of vice president. From Irish Constitution, we had borrowed directive principles of state policy, nomination of members to Rajya Sabha, and method of election of president. From Canadian Constitution, we had borrowed federation with a strong center, vesting of residuary powers in the center, appointment of state governors by the center, and advisory jurisdiction of the Supreme Court. From Australian Constitution, we had borrowed concurrent list, freedom of trade, commerce and intercourse, and joint sitting of the two houses of parliament. From Weimar Constitution of Germany, we had borrowed suspension of fundamental rights during emergency. Soviet Constitution or USSR, which is now known as Russia, we had borrowed the fundamental duties and the ideal of justice, like social, economic, and political, in the preamble. From French Constitution, we had borrowed republic and the ideals of liberty, equality, and fraternity in the preamble. From South African Constitution, we had borrowed procedure for amendment of the Constitution and election of members of Rajya Sabha. From Japanese Constitution, we had borrowed the procedure established by law. Blend of rigidity and flexibility as the salient feature of the Indian Constitution. The Constitution are also classified into rigid and flexible. A rigid Constitution is one that requires a special procedure to make the amendment, as for example, the American Constitution. A flexible Constitution, on the other hand, is one that can be amended in the same manner as the ordinary laws are made, as for example, the British Constitution. The Constitution of India is neither rigid nor flexible, but a synthesis of both. Article 368 provides for two types of amendments. Some provisions could be amended by the special majority of the parliament. Therefore, a two-third majority of the members of each house present and voting, and a majority of total membership of each house. Some other provisions could be amended by a special majority of the parliament and with the ratification by half of the total states. Some provisions of the Constitution could be amended by a simple majority of the parliament in the manner of ordinary legislative process. Federal system with unitary bias. The Constitution of India established a federal system of government. Two government, which means one at center level, another is at state levels. Division of powers, union list and state list. Written Constitution, the functions, responsibilities, and duties already enshrined in the Constitution itself. Supremacy of the Constitution. Being a written Constitution, there is the supremacy of Constitution over the government activities. Rigidity of Constitution. Independent judiciary. Bicameralism. Unitary features: a strong center, single constitution, single citizenship, flexibility of constitution, integrated judiciary, appointment of state governor by the center, all India services, emergency provisions. The Indian constitution has been variously described as federal in form but unitary in spirit, therefore known as quasi-federal. Here we have finished this lecture. It is requested to all of you kindly revise the facts and figures before you come for the another lecture. With this note, let's end this lecture and thank you.